All right, so Shannon was very interested in juggling and in unicycling, and that's expressed in like a whole heap of gadgets he built, juggling gadgets, but also he derived a couple of, well, really the first juggling theorems. And when you actually have a look at these things, which would be really good on the computer, you would actually discover a lot more about him than if you look at any of his technical papers. So I'll just tell you a little bit about those devices that he built. So you saw some of them in the clip that they showed at the very beginning. So there were some juggling diorama where you see clowns juggling clubs and balls and rings. These were just kind of just pulled around by strings. But he also constructed a real juggling robot, the first juggling robot really, making use of bounce juggling. So instead of juggling balls as usual in the air like this, you have rubber balls and you bounce them off the ground, which is a lot easier because basically gravity and the ground do all the work, whereas with this sort of juggling you have to do it. Right? He had other things like in his basement he had an air hockey table that was kind of tilted like this, and you can actually simulate low gravity juggling on something like this. And actually, if you actually ever go to a pub, you should try this, like just on a billiards table. Just do it. Take some of these balls and kind of bounce them off the cushions, and you can actually slow down juggling really, really, really nicely, and you can kind of go up to 7 balls with no trouble at all. Right? Whereas it takes you years and years of practice if you wanted to actually do this in like this sort of normal kind of juggling. So he had like lots and lots of these little gadgets, zoetropes of juggling clowns and all sorts of things. But then he also had a really, really close look at juggling as it's done like in the juggling clubs that he went to. The juggling clubs, so he rode unicycles at work, down the corridors, for example. Me too, actually. And just in general, he comes across as a really, really cool guy, right? And I mean, at the time when he was around, he was probably the only guy like this, right? I mean, these days, there's how many people juggle here? That's very few. I would have expected like half the people here lift with their hands. Well, if you don't, really, I mean, this is like the one thing that you should really do after this. Forget about all the rest, just get some balls out and start juggling. So anyway, so he had a look at, what everybody does, like it's this sort of juggling, right? So this sort of juggling, or normal 4-ball juggling, or normal 5-ball juggling, but also, I mean, he would have juggled together with other people, right? So there would have been like maybe 5 people kind of juggling together, and all these juggles that they did there, they had a couple of things in common. They were all uniform juggling patterns. And uniform juggling patterns, what they all have in common is that if you look at the time it takes for a single object when it leaves the hand until it's caught again, it takes always the same amount of time. So the flight always takes the same amount of time. Also, when something leaves the hand, before the hand catches something again, for the hand to be vacant always takes the same amount of time. Another thing is like when you catch a ball, you catch it and then kind of carries it for a while, that also always takes the same amount of time. And then, so you've got these 5 different variables, number of balls, hands, flight time, vacant time, and dwell time. And when you look at it, you can kind of put them together into a really, really nice formula. It's just balls divided by hands is equal to flight time plus dwell divided by vacant time plus dwell. Very nice formula, nicely symmetrical. And actually, there's a nice duality built into this whole setup where you can actually think of the balls juggling the hands. And then another thing he did was he actually classified all possible uniform juggling patterns, and it actually also a very nice result. So you just look at the balls in the hands. What's the greatest common divisor? If the greatest common divisor is 1, it's basically just one pattern like this. If it's anything else, the number of different uniform juggling patterns with that configuration of balls and hands is just the number of partitions of that number. How many different ways you can write it as a sum. So for example, with 4 balls, 4 balls, 2 hands, what's the greatest common divisor? 4 and 2? 2. There's only 2 ways of partitioning 2, which is 1 plus 1 and 2. And I just show you what these things look like. So that's alternating juggling, and that's the other kind of uniform juggling. with 4 balls. I think that's all we have time for, so thanks a lot for that.